Good morning, geometry class. It's time for us to do 10.7. This is called Tesselations. And as we begin this lesson, I'm also going to put my video is going to be pretty short today. I'm going to put another video about helping you understand tessellations and what they are in the description. So the first thing that we want to see is that a tessellation of a planar region is a covering of the region with one or more figures so that there are no overlaps or gaps. So you can see in this particular picture, this is just kind of a cute tessellation that you have here. You can see it's just the same figures repeated over and over and over again and come together so that there's no gaps in the image. So that's what a tessellation is. So there are three geometric figures that create a uniform regular tessellation. And those three figures are the hexagon, the square, and the triangle. And so you can see in this particular image that I have for you is that it's hexagon, 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 only made up of hexagons, and they all meet at the same size and the same shape so that it's a regular pattern over and over and over again. You can do the same thing with some of the other shapes like the triangle and the square. So as we look at this, you can see here that this is another tessellation. It's kind of an image that's supposed to challenge your visual perspective. But in this particular image, you can see that it's a tessellation. It's just a number of squares that have been repeated over and over and over again. But there are no gaps or spaces in between those images. That's what makes it a tessellation. Here again, I go back to the hexagon, and the hexagon is called a regular tessellation. And a regular tessellation is made up of a single image, a polygon. And again, what we said is there are three images that do that: the triangle, the square, and the hexagon. Okay, in today's lesson, in the homework that you're given, it talks about the number sequence that's associated with each tessellation. Like in some questions, they're going to ask, is this a proper tessellation? And if it is, give the number sequence. I'm not going to require you to come up with the number sequences this year because it'd be a difficult thing for me to try and do without being there to help you through the process. So when you see the number sequence of a tessellation, you can just ignore that. There are three types of tessellations that we want to learn about, and that's the regular tessellation, the irregular tessellation, and the semi-regular tessellation. Regular tessellation is one shape repeated over and over and over again, like this triangle, the square, and the hexagon. And a semi-regular says that when you go to a vertex, you're going to have the same pattern at each and every vertex. And then we have an irregular tessellation in which there's not really a pattern at each vertex. You'll have different vertexes that have different patterns. So this is an example of an irregular. And then on the next couple of slides, I've got an irregular and a semi-regular for you. But in this particular slide, if we were to look, let's choose a vertex. So if we choose this vertex right here, I'm going to see 1, 2, 3 triangles and 1, 2 squares. Do you see that? Now, if I go to another vertex, let's say this vertex right here. On this particular vertex, we have 1, 2, 3 squares and 1 triangle. So the same thing doesn't happen at each and every single vertex. So we're going to call this an irregular tessellation. So now this next one. Is this regular, semi-regular, or irregular tessellation. I don't know why I don't have the word irregular in that, but I'm looking for, is it a semi-regular, irregular, or regular tessellation? So I'd like you to take a moment and see if you can't work through this. I know for me personally, what I would do is I would choose a vertex right away at the beginning. So I could take like this vertex. And what do you have next to that vertex? Well, I think we have one square and two parallelograms. Two parallelograms. So we do find other places where you have one square and, excuse me, let me go back, maybe. We do have other places where we have one square and two parallelograms. But then I also have a vertex like the one in the center. And in the center, I have two squares and four parallelograms. So therefore, I'd call this an irregular tessellation. So you might be thinking, okay, Mr. Wilson, I know what a regular one is. That's when you have all those hexagons or all those triangles or all those squares. But what is a semi-regular? Well, here's an example of another tessellation. And this one is going to be a semi-regular tessellation. Let me show you how this works. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to choose a vertex, any vertex here. And at this vertex, I see that I have one triangle, and I also find 1, 2 squares, and I also find that there is one hexagon. So now I could go any place, and I'm going to try and make this hard on myself. And I'm going to try and choose kind of sort of a random spot someplace else in the diagram, like right here. And again, I find one triangle, and I find two squares. There's a square, and there's a square, and one hexagon. Now play around with it if you want, but inside the tessellation, that means in the interior of the tessellation, forget a vertex like this. That's on the edge of the tessellation, but you could keep adding on to this tessellation and get the same exact thing. Inside of that tessellation, you find one triangle, two squares, and one hexagon. So there you have a semi-regular tessellation. All right? So again, this is semi-regular. Not a very long lesson today. That's okay. That'll give you more time to work on your homework, and it's not a hard lesson. So 10.7 is what we have for the lesson, and 507 to 508, you could see what I had other years. A lot of times we worked on the numbering patterns of a tessellation. I don't really want to work on that without being present with you guys in the class. If you got any questions, please let me know. Our homework for this year is going to be numbers 1 to 4, 11 to 16, and when you find the numbering sequences, skip those. Okay? If you'd like to look up and read, because the textbook does have a good explanation of how to do those, if you really want to, you can go right ahead and do that. I'll give you credit for the work that you've done. All right? Have a great night. Do good on your homework. I got another video. It's not going to be it's just going to be a what tessellations are type of video. Enjoy. Have a great night. Talk to you tomorrow.